in the spirit, fullest control.
I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about unblocking your creativity. All of us have a desire to be creative, and in order to have fulfilling and happy lives, we need to be creative. We need to be creative in our minds and in our active lives. And as we strive to be creative, so often many of us believe that we can't be creative, that we can't have new ideas, that we never seem to have enough time to do the things that we want to do. One of the tools that is very useful in building creativity is dispelling the disorganization in our lives. In New Thought philosophy, we believe that we live in our minds and not in the world. That means that we live within our thought processes and that the experiences that we have outside of life, your experiences and my experiences, are really determined by the way that we feel about them. So as we condition our way of thinking, we're able to reinterpret our quality and way of life. Disorganization in our mind is as destructive or possibly more destructive than disorganization and disarray in our daily world. All of us feel the effects of our environment. Every one of us has had the opportunity to go into a home or a room or a building and have a certain feeling, and the feeling is either positive or negative. We have a natural intuition that allows us to feel what the environment is bringing to us. And for most of us, if the environment, the physical environment, our room or our office or our home is in disarray, then we feel unsettled. The same situation takes place in our minds. If in our minds we are disorganized, misdirected, and always at ends, never organized and never harmonized and balanced, our creative flow begins to stop. As a matter of fact, in the midst of disorganization, we can have great difficulty exhibiting any kind of creativity. One of the realities of life is that if we're going to fill some space, we need to have an empty place for it to be filled. And that's kind of the premise behind cleaning up our room and getting order into our daily lives. That is that if we put things in their right place, if we keep things orderly, then we're aligned and we're prepared to have other things come into our lives and we have a place to put them. But if we never put things away, if we never put things in order, then we never have space for new things. And in our mind, the same principle is operating. If our minds are filled and jumbled all of the time, if we're overburdened and taxed, and we never have room for new ideas, we never have room for intuition, and we never have room for the guidance that we believe that the universal spirit of divine love and light, God, is bringing to us at all times. In order to plug our energy leak, we need to be conscious of the things that we're doing, the way that we're spending our time, and the thoughts that we're thinking. So often we go through our daily lives thinking that we have to be at work at this time, we have to pick the children up at that time, we have to go to this club meeting, we have to write this letter, we have to pay this bill, and our days go on in unceasing progression. And before we know it, the weeks have turned into months, and the months have turned into years, and we seem not to have accomplished anything. That's an energy drain, and the drain is draining the energy from our thought process and from our ability in daily life to be creative and share with other people. Catching up is no fun. All of us who are behind have that oppressed feeling and the difficulty that comes with never seeming to catch up. And so what we need to do in our external lives and within our minds and hearts is catch up with the responsibilities that we have, catch up with life itself, and catch up with our mind so that we are in sync with what's going on in our mind, we are in sync with what's going on in our lives. In order to do that, we need to stop making commitments that we can't fulfill, and we need to work to fulfill the commitments that we've made. So many of us find it difficult to say, no, I can't do that, or to order our life and make appointments in such a way that we really have time to devote the attention that we need to those things that are important in our lives. That means that we have to make choices. It means that we have to make decisions. It means that we have to define our values and decide what it is in life that is important and direct our thoughts and our efforts and our life to those things. And the beginning point is to get over always trying to catch up, and that begins with stopping the additional commitments that we have. If your life is uncreative, if you are out of energy, if you're always tired, if you're attempting to get caught up, if you feel that there's no connectiveness with balance and harmony in your life, then you need to unblock these creative channels. You need to redirect your thought in life. In order to do this, we have to undo and let go of the unnecessary baggage. Stop for a few moments each day and think about the way that you spend your day, the way that you spend your time. Stop for a few moments and analyze how it is that your mind operates. Is it always going at 100 miles an hour? Is there always something that you have to do? Is there always a driving force that keeps you from feeling centered and peaceful and open and receptive to the creativity that is normally and naturally flowing into your life? But do your thoughts and does your busyness stop this magnificent flow of creativity? So many of us have unfinished business. All of us are plagued with the reality of unfinished business at one point in time. But many of us have unfinished business all of the time. As a matter of fact, many of us never finish a task. We never finish a project. We never finish a commitment. And bringing finality to the events of life is an absolute imperative if we're going to be creative and if we're going to be able to share our abilities with others, and most importantly, if we're going to share our consciousness with ourselves in a peaceful, creative, and balanced way. We sabotage ourselves. We sabotage ourselves by being more busy than we need to be, by making more commitments than we should, by agreeing to do things that we know that we can't. And it is our obligation and our responsibility to be mindful of what it is we do and how it is we think, because the thought processes of our mind will determine the quality of our life. So if your life is not filled with creativity, if you are blocked, examine your life. Move away from the negative influences of life and make a decision that you have to choose. You have to choose what's important to you in your life. You have to choose how you spend your 24 hours a day. You have to choose how it is you're going to think about life. In New Thought, we teach that we need to have an affirmative view of life. We need to have positive, uplifting values, ideas, and thoughts. And when we have those positive thoughts, we connect with the divine mind of God, which is the source of all positive desire, all creativity, all balance, all harmony, and all guidance. And that has nothing to do with the church you go to. It has nothing to do with your religion. It has only to do with the way that you think and the relationship that you have with the universal principle that we call God. And so in this philosophy of New Thought, we invite you to begin to examine the way that you think and to begin to unplug the creativity that is being blocked because of the disorganization and the overcommitment of life. Perhaps it's meditation, perhaps it's prayer, perhaps it's 10 minutes of quiet silence in your bedroom or in your den. Perhaps it's a walk in the yard or a walk around the block. But take the time every day to examine how it is you're thinking, how it is you're living, and whether or not you are giving and making more commitments than you have time to fulfill. And because of that, you're short-circuiting your very life, and you're confusing your mind and confounding your life and making your existence far more difficult than it needs to be. There's a magnificent power in the universe. That power is God, and that power welcomes you to a place of peace, of creativity, of balance. But the choices are yours, and how you spend your life in this physical life and in the unconscious life of the other side is determined solely by the dynamic of your mind. So we invite you to examine your life, to consider how it is you spend your time, and to unplug the creativity block that might be stopping you from the great good in your life. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and invite you to join with us in a reflection. We believe in prayer as a centering force, and we invite you to join with us now in this moment. Eternal and loving God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the realization that each moment of our life is a responsibility, and how we choose to use that moment is a decision that we make. And so we decide this moment to be organized, to be centered, to be peaceful, and to unite our hearts and minds with your divine presence. We know these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
Those were wonderful reminders on how to unblock our creativity. And all of life should be creative, and you pointed that out so eloquently.
I think so often we want to be creative, but we don't know how. And we don't know how because we're so busy doing other things, and yet we don't know what we're doing.
That's the point. And you made that very well, because if we rush about, then we certainly can't be creative. We're so busy rushing about. And we need to sometimes make our footsteps grow faster, but to keep our energies quieted. And there's a difference.
Very big difference. And also, I think in your life and in my life, certainly, and in every busy person's life, there is the reality of having to say no.
Yes.
And I think
Indeed.
that's very difficult for many people.
It is difficult for many people. They just can't do it. But if they would learn to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that, they would save so much energy. Because energy is expended whenever we have to make excuses. And we don't need to make excuses. We can just say, I can't, sorry.
Mm-hmm. But why do you suppose it is that people aren't able to make those decisions?
Well, there's a cliche, so-and-so is a pleaser. So everyone wants to please everyone else. And I think it's because they don't feel secure within themselves. Of those people who do stay busy, as you pointed out, are more apt to be able to make choices because they have to make choices. They have to in order to keep their work going and to keep their workload stay on top of it. But if they can't stay in that modality, then it's just normal for them to want to please everyone.
Yes. Making those choices really has to be based upon our values, doesn't it?
Yes.
And we have to prioritize what's important to us. And I think so often we want to be self-important,
Yes.
and we also want to fulfill the needs, as you said, of a lot of other people. But in truth, we all have to decide where it is we're going to expend our energy and how effective we can be in those areas.
Yes, as I've looked at other people about me who get in trouble because they can't do things on time, then usually they try to please everyone all the time, and no one can do that. I have a younger sister who used to do that when she was very young, and she would promise to come to my home and then not show. And then she'd be embarrassed to call to say, I'm sorry, I can't make it to dinner, as I had promised to do. And when I called her hand on it, she says, well, I just hate to disappoint you when I call, which she disappointed me in not showing when she had promised to show. But she didn't want to hear my disappointment. So then they just get into a scramble that way.
Right.
But she learned, and in time she changed, and she told her children after they were grown, don't ever fall into the trap that I did.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that we have to learn and grow into. But life is a series of choices, and we just have to learn to make our choices.
And as we make the choices, we need to make choices, and we need to believe and understand that God believes we're worthy
Yes.
of making choices that
Yes.
are for our best good and for others' best good. And that some of those choices may not please other people, but it is a decision that we need to make. One of the things that I think so often about is that people who will invite me or others to a dinner party or
Mm-hmm.
to a social event, and which is supposed to be a happy occasion. It's supposed to be a sharing time, a fellowship. And then we arrive, and the host or hostess says, oh, I'm so exhausted from getting ready for this, I can't enjoy myself. And that really bothers me, because those people have expended this energy, this creativity, for something that they truly don't enjoy, or they've overexpended their energy so they can't enjoy it. And I think we do that often in our lives.
It's such a waste. And we do it in our offices, we do it in our homes, we do it in all ways, not just in cases like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if we stay centered all the time, and which is getting our energies collected and then staying centered with the divine energy, and that's so easy to do. If we do that, then we don't go into those problem areas, because we just stay clear-headed.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot on this program about centering and that important issue of life. And that, of course, is fundamental to New Thought philosophy. But maybe we should talk a little bit about it, because I don't think we can ever talk about it too much. And people often ask me, even people who have been true students for a long time, questions about centering and how that comes about. And of course, what we're talking about today is one more mechanism of centering.
Yes, and when we are centered, then our creativity is right there, and we can access that creative aspect of our own being. But if we're not, then we're scattered. And that's what you were talking about in the rush, and then our energies get scattered because we have 7 bodies. And as we function from each of those bodies, or as they function for us for that specific need, then we have to remember that we're not just a physical body, there's those other bodies. So as we are aligned in those 7 full bodies, then we are centered with God's own energy, creative, divine energy. And being centered is just simply breathing deeply and feeling divine presence. And you can feel like a plumb line going from the base of your spine, up your spine, through the top of your head, and it would come out where the soft spot is in the head. And they can visualize that. And creative visualization is a wonderful way of unblocking creativity. So they can just visualize this crystal tube going from the base of the spine, from the root chakra, which is at the base of the spine, past the other 4 centers, which are the chakras, or the wheel of life, it's known in Sanskrit words. And then we're opening ourselves to divine energy in that way.
And then as that opens, there's a connectiveness between the physical bodies and the spiritual bodies. Isn't that true? And then
That's
we
right.
begin to resonate with balance and harmony.
Yes, because we have the 3 higher bodies are more spiritually oriented, and the 3 lower bodies are more physically oriented. And then the heart chakra at the heart area over the thymus gland is the key between the 2. And so when we're steady in our lower bodies, then that reflects into our heart chakra. That therefore reflects into the higher centers, the spiritual centers. Then we're functioning with cohesiveness from all aspects of our own being. And it might sound very complicated, but it isn't. All we have to do is just breathe deeply and think of God, the whole, and our connection with God. And that's really all it amounts to. The rest falls into place. It's just like if you're baking a cake, you put certain ingredients together and then it forms the cake. But by no means do you have that gorgeous cake when you're having the batter pouring into the pan. So it's the same idea.
Yeah, and there is a process, and it's a relatively simple process.
Yes.
And I think that so many people think when we talk about centering or we talk about unleashing our creativity or unblocking our creativity, that there's some complex formula and that it's hard to learn these principles. And in fact, these principles are effortless. Isn't that true?
Exactly. And that's it. It just falls into place so easily when we are attuned to divine energy. And divine energy is all around us, easily accessible and readily available. We have but to call it to us. And when we call it to us, it's there and it's a part of us. And another thing, we don't need to be so involved in the world today in so many things. We don't need to watch all the news that many people do and dwell on the negativity of life. And we can watch it and forget it, but we don't need to watch it over and over because it just reinforces the bad things, because we know that the news is just going to bring in negativity, and that's okay. But we don't need reinforce it over and over, because then we're shattering our emotional bodies and not being able then to function from that level.
Yeah. Very important for us to be aware of the fact that as our minds operate, so goes our entire life. And if we let our minds operate on a negative plane of existence, and many people live in negative experiences all the time, the impact that that has to stop our creativity and stop our centering is just devastating.
Yes. Well, some people do live in negativity, and I know psychologists will tell us that that's true, and they'll point out very often to parents, well, this child functions from a negative. I know I had that happen at one time when I was responsible for a child who thought so negatively, and the psychologist or psychiatrist that we were seeing said, don't try to put yourself in her place. You can't, because she functions from a negative pole, and God grant that she changed later in her life, I wouldn't know. But she was functioning from that negative pole, and nothing made her happy. Nothing was ever enough. And that's very tragic. And God grant that anyone who's like that would change, because there's no way they can have energy for creativity, because their energies just go scattered in all directions.
It's important to remember that when we have people that are negative, and if we have negative tendencies, as many do, then as you said, watching the news or surrounding ourselves with these negative influences is certainly counterproductive. And so we have to make a conscious decision to avoid negativity at all levels until we're able to overcome it with our positive
That's
life.
right.
And
That's right.
so people have to be aware sometimes that even family members, and we're certainly not a cultist and talking
No.
about disassociating with family, but we are saying that sometimes in family situations, in relationships, in personal circles of friends, that people need to sever those relationships, because if we are susceptible, if certain of us are susceptible to negative thought and negative influence, the last thing we need to do is surround ourselves with negativity.
Exactly. And I think it's wise just to step back at first and see what happens and step back away from that person's energies and then see if we can come together then later on in harmony. But if we can't, then I think severing the relationship is the wise thing to do, because not everyone's going to get along with everyone all the time. And we come in to certain families so that we'll learn specific lessons. And when we feel we've learned our lesson, then we would feel free to step back. And I would like to say that if we can step back or sever the relationship without putting negative energy into it, but just doing it as a very matter-of-fact way, then it means it's okay. From the inner planes, it's okay to do it. And I know that's true of divorces. When couples think of divorcing, if they are still fighting and they're still ranting at each other, it means they've not worked through that energy. So they need to work through the energy, either married or after they're divorced, but they need to do that and then be able to step back. And the point is to detach and release. And if I could give any advice, it would be detach and release, and then see where you come from with that person. And if the animosity is still there and you can't do anything about it, then sever the relationship.
And of course, as we detach and release from people, we have to be brave enough to stand on our own.
Exactly.
Which is often the difficulty in relationships, not only a married relationship or personal relationships, but with children, with friends, at all levels, our
Yeah.
relationships
Yeah.
mean that sometimes we have to stand alone.
That's right. That's correct. And even in business, we have to do that in a sense, because we can give extra time to business acquaintances, or we can just give the bare essentials. That's our choice. And if the people are not comfortable for us to be with, then we don't have to do that. All we have to do is be polite, courteous, and fulfill our obligations. And we don't have to do the social things and the extra mile. And I think that's where people fall into trouble. They think they have to be nice to everyone all the time, but everyone is not, that's not necessary. And there's a young man who died and came back and gave information through his mother for a book, Within and Beyond. Susie Ward's son gave her the information that on the inner planes, they're not obligated to be effusive with everyone they see. All they have to do is be courteous and polite. And I thought that was really nice, because he was trying to tell her, you don't have to go out of your way to be extra nice to Mrs. So-and-so because their relationship was strained. He says, all you have to do is be courteous and polite. And that's the way it is here in Nirvana, on the fourth plane, in the fourth dimension.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And we learn the principle of blessing and releasing people
Yes.
in life. And it's often a difficult thing to do, but it helps us and it helps them.
That's right. And we feel the blessing ourselves if we do, because it means we're not functioning from anger or rancor. We're functioning from just normal thinking.
And then we're open to the creativity that we have. And the
Yes.
creativity may guide us in a totally different direction, or it creates the space to take us into a new relationship or to new people.
Yes, and we can use that creativity in so many ways. It's not just having a creative career, it's just living every day creatively. It's just like when we take a walk, to creatively observe. And if we're out in public, creatively observe and send a blessing to people who look as if they're down and having an emotional problem. Just smiling at people, that's a creative way of living, because we're creatively lifting their spirits, and it does.
Absolutely. Psychologists tell us that just by having telephone operators smile, even though they can't see the people to whom they're speaking, but just having them smile creates a different inflection in their voice and creates a different vibration. We know it creates a
Yes.
different vibration.
Yes, it does indeed. And it's so exciting to know that we create our own reality. We create our own environment. We create our relationships with others. And very often, if we just soft soap people along and try to be goody-goody with them, that's not doing them any favor at all. It doesn't allow them to grow, because sometimes people need lessons from us of just being matter-of-fact with them. And then it does both of us a favor. It gives them a chance to get on their feet emotionally, and then it gives us the opportunity too. So I think we don't have to just be effusive and gushy and outgoing with everyone all the time. Know that just quietude is also essential.
And I think it's important for those listening who don't know a great deal about our philosophy, about New Thought teaching, that when we talk in these terms, we don't talk about these teachings and these philosophies as being apart from God. And we're not negating the power of God, but we're not giving over to God control of our life, because God, in fact, has given total control to us.
Exactly.
And so often people will say to me when they're asking questions about New Thought, isn't it true that your religion, your philosophy is humanistic and that you cut God out of it? And I think people need to understand that New Thought philosophy teaches that God is very much a part of everything that we do, but that there is personal responsibility, and that just because we have human responsibility and commitment doesn't mean we diminish the power of God at all.
My goodness, exactly. And we give God greater credibility, really, than many others, because we say that we are a part of God and we can connect with God's own energy. So that's bringing God right into our lives every day. And to me, that's the ideal. The more we can stay centered to God's own energy, the more we're connected to God, divine creator God who made us. And so it's always that God is there with us constantly. And that's what we strive for in New Thought. To me, that's what we strive for, is the constant connection with God's own energy.
Absolutely. And Reverend Freelander and I have been discussing with you concepts in confident living and unblocking your creativity. And in doing that, you unite your heart and mind with the power and mind of God. We hope that you found this information useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit, moves from within. Confident living rights every wrong.